Okay, I am recording, so let's go ahead and get started. Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our last Power Up session of the year. This one is titled Best Practices in Capacity Planning. My name is Thomas Meredith, Vice President of Marketing, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Joining us on today's webcast will be Randy Mislovic, RMI Managing Director, and Maria Elena DePilla from NTT Data. I'm very excited to have her with us for today's presentation. We are scheduled for 30 minutes, so I won't take up too much time at the top here, but let me tell you, we are recording today's Power Up webinar, and we'll get a link to that recording sent out later today. We have made a PDF copy of the deck available as well in your GoToWebinar panel, so you can feel free to download that. And of course, we will have a Q&A session at the conclusion of the presentation. So please enter your questions in your GoToWebinar panel. We'll be moderating those, and we'll have a quick session at the end. Okay, that is it for me. Let me step aside and welcome RMI Managing Director Randy Mislovic. Randy, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it, and welcome everyone to our fourth Power Up broadcast of 2019. And really looking forward to working our way through this topic on best practices in capacity planning. Let me start by saying thanks to our three sponsors who help us make this possible, MavenLink, Keyed In, and Kimball Applications. All three companies have been terrific supporters of the Resource Management Institute. We appreciate their sponsorship of this broadcast. So I'm going to just do a quick introduction of the RMI for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are, in a nutshell, dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management through thought leadership, best practices, standards, and globally recognized credentials in the area of resource management. And primarily we're focused on things that are not only just resource management related, but resource management impacted, so to speak. Project performance being top of our list relative to the impact of how important it is to get the right person in the right place at the right time. We also focus on how to better utilize resources, improve customer satisfaction, and employee engagement and retention also are nice byproducts, if done right, in improving the morale and retention of our employees. And so those are all things that we focus on. And we do that through best practice definition and development, which we communicate through a variety of things, including our certification program. We conduct a lot of market research and write white papers. If you haven't been to the website, I would encourage you to do that. We actually have a research study going on right now relative to sourcing and how people source people and third parties, what's working, what doesn't work, best practices in the area of sourcing. So if you haven't, if you'd like to get that data, this is a really super hot topic. Go out and take our quick survey. It takes less than 10 minutes, and you'll get some great data on sourcing for your business. We do training, education, and events like this in Power Up. We have an annual symposium that we run and a variety of things. So that's a little bit about the RMI. Best thing about the RMI, and this is just a quick snapshot of our website. It's free to join. All you do is go up to that right-hand link in the upper right-hand corner there and join, and put in a little bit of information, and you can become a member, and again, get you behind the firewall, and you get access to a ton of resource management related data, research reports, white papers, and other things, all for free. Through your interaction as a member with the RMI, you have opportunities to collaborate with other people, and that's, we're trying to have built a large and growing community of people that are either resource managers, RMO leaders, project managers, executives who are responsible for efficient management of people, but great opportunities to collaborate through our community tools, our forum, and other things. You have opportunities to innovate through not only our RMCP certification program, but in the insights that we provide through our market research and white papers. Hopefully those are things that you can apply and bring value to your business. And then certainly we have a variety of different educational opportunities to help build your knowledge of RM processes and the supporting technology needed to do those. So anyway, that's a quick commercial on the RMI. Let me just move into our topic for today, which is best practices in capacity planning. I will start off with some brief RMI thought leadership and viewpoints on this topic. And then I'm going to ask Maria Elena DePillo from NTT Data to spend a little bit of time talking about what she does and what they do as it relates to resource management, particularly capacity planning at NTT Data. So I'll begin with some simple definitional stuff, which is, what is capacity planning? And, in a nutshell, it's comprised of both demand and supply, demand being comprised of active and future work, and supply are the resources that you need to service that particular demand that's been identified, and how well we identify our demand leads us a lot to the actions that we might take in order to be able to have our supply of resources, both trained, ready, capacity in the right places in order to service demand for your businesses. And this graphic at the bottom here, I think, hopefully does a nice job of showing. We know that, at any one point in time, we've got active projects going on where you've done some matching of supply and demand, but on the right and the left, you've got unassigned demand and unassigned supply, and hopefully those things come together. So hopefully that's a nice, just so we're all talking about the same thing as it relates to what capacity planning is. And by the way, the goal, hopefully goes without saying, is to keep supply and demand in balance at all times. And we know that that will never be perfect, but the closer we get to the mark about never having big gaps of if I got demand that can't be serviced with, or be on the other side of that where I've got lots of supply resources who are sitting on a bench. Neither one of those are things that you want to have happen. So the goal is to keep supply and demand in balance at all times. And so when we talk about capacity planning in our resource management certification program, we teach a 3-part approach to capacity planning. That starts with the business, part 1 is the business planning process that many of you go through every year. I think a lot of companies call this the annual budget process, but if you're in a delivery organization, people are asking, how many people do you need next year, and what's that going to cost, or when do you need them, where do you need them? And we go through this budget planning process, and which is, for most companies is January through December, but those on a fiscal basis, at some point in time of the year, you're going through that process. And that creates I'll call it the high-level framework of parameters and an initial baseline of planning, and that drives us to this middle box, which is the living plan. And this is, I'll just call, as we know, the minute the new year starts, irrespective of what the budget was set at, things start to change. Demand's higher than we thought, maybe lower than we thought. We have some people who left the business, or our attrition rate wasn't as high as we thought. Things start to change, and so this is where the living plan takes the business plan and starts to massage it, because we know that things change, and we try to do that over a long enough time horizon. Generally, 6 months is kind of the minimum we shoot for, because retraining people, hiring people, training people, these things take time, and so you need a long enough of a time horizon to be prepared to be able to do those things. And then we have these continual updates that are continuously changing the living plan. We continue to revise and adapt. And then the last is the staffing. I'll just call this the daily tactical, day-to-day assignment, the triage of making sure that I've got people doing, starting projects, filling the gaps where I might have a project that's got a bump in the road, maybe somebody quits in the middle of the project, whatever the things are that create those dynamics that makes our jobs as resource managers challenging. We've got these day-to-day things that we do. And so this is where your understanding of your capacity by geo, by role, by skill set certainly got to be the most detailed, because it's the place where you have to actually apply people to the work in order to get those things done. So at a high level, when you kind of step back from this, I talked about supply and demand in those 2 boxes. One is on demand side, developing that forecast of what the delivery effort is I'm going to have to do with some level of granularity, and then be able to characterize my supply in a way that I could effectively match that to my demand in some way. And I've got roll-off reports from current projects. I've got hiring plans I'm doing, maybe training plans and those sorts of things. But these things all need to come together into an interlock between the delivery teams, whether you're in professional consulting services, enterprise IT, product development, you're in a marketing agency, you have project-based work or any other kind of project-based organization where the delivery team that needs to deliver it and the stakeholders that are on the receiving side of that capacity hopefully stay close together so we don't have a sales team that's unhappy, enterprise organization, business units that are not happy that they're not getting things when they want and how they want it. And by the way, the other side of that, where we don't have a bunch of people sitting on the bench and we've got a big building hole in our budget for the year because we've got people sitting on the bench. So this whole area of interlock is a process by which these stakeholders agree on the drivers of demand, future capacity, and this interlock piece really, really important to making this capacity planning process work that I talked about. So at a high level, we've got research reports, white papers, you'll find prior power-ups, our symposium, we have tons of sessions around capacity planning, forecasting. So a lot of things, if you're a member, you can go back and research to give you input into how you do this in addition to our Resource Management Certified Professional Program. Always helpful is to hear from an organization that's out there doing this in the real world, and I'm delighted to have Maria Elena DePilla, Resource Management Senior Specialist Advisor, NTT Data, here to talk to us. She works in the public sector and commercial account side of their business, and she works with the business leaders there on fulfillment strategy, optimizing utilization, bench management, the things that we in the resource management organizations do. She's well educated in both HR, occupational safety, and health management, and she's a graduate of our Resource Management Certified Professional Program as well. And last but certainly not least, she serves on the our Resource Management Institute's advisory board and has been really, really helpful to us. So with that, Maria Elena, I can't thank you enough for being here with us, and I'll let you talk about what you have to say about capacity planning.
Thank you, Randy. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So what I'm going to do is just present today our process, NTT Data's process with regard to capacity planning. And the agenda will include where it falls within our organization, our model, and then I'm going to share some final thoughts. So on the slide here, what I'd like to do is just begin with high level, the end-to-end process. So our end-to-end process, and it looks like it's in an arrow, starts with workforce planning and analytics, and then moves into demand fulfillment. And in the center, what I'm showing is that capacity planning falls on that workforce planning and analytics, kind of that side of that arrow. It's a part of that intake piece along with demand management and planning. And then it kind of slides into staffing, and then we also have our people supply chain, and then certainly across all areas we have governance. So our capacity planning, it falls within the Global Resource Management Organization. Again, it's a part of our workforce planning and analytics process. We have a dedicated role in NTT Data called a practice partner. This person drives and manages capacity planning with our practice leads and other stakeholders within the overall resource management process. Next slide, please. Okay. And then in looking at the model with regard to capacity planning, the starting point is taking a high-level view of our demand and supply. Again, this is what makes capacity planning work. You have to have a view of both. I'll talk about some sources of demand. We look at our sales pipeline. The account partners, that's another role within the GRM organization. We work on the front end with our sales team to review that pipeline. We also have access to cost models. Cost models, resource model, they're kind of used interchangeably, but that's another potential source of demand. And then also for the actual positions or requisitions, another type of source of demand is a resource request. That's a term that we use within NTT Data. Some people call it a job requisition, some people call it a position, but it's once you get beyond the pipeline and the cost model and you have it translated into an actual position, we call that a resource request. Okay, that forecast is translated into demand. It's entered into our tool. And then our practice partners rely on this important step to have visibility into the pipeline for capacity planning. Additionally, we're taking a look at the supply, and we start with our internal supply. That would include our available and forecasted bench, resources that are allocated, but perhaps they're releasable. We look at our underutilized. Perhaps we have employees that are not full allocated. And then we also take a look at our freshers. That's a term that we use for junior resources that are coming into the organization, along with junior resources that are trained. And then finally, we take a look at our attrition. We have the ability to pull that out of our HR system. And what that is going to do is that's going to tell us what our reduced supply looks like. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, let me talk a little bit more about demand. So again, we talked about the sources being the sales pipeline. I talked about a cost model, and then I talked about resource request. So specifically, when you're digging into this demand, we want to have a view of the current and the future positions. And that should also include your new and replacement. So not just the net new, but perhaps you have employees that are leaving, and you'll want to capture that. We call them either replacements or backfills. And then something else that is important to collect as part of your source demand is historical data. What types of positions have we filled? What positions have been in the demand that are canceled and or lost? And then it becomes a little bit of a science where you're applying some you're applying some things such as a percentage of your active demand that's filled or will be filled. You're also looking at your percentage of your pipeline that will materialize. And then there may be a consideration around your dropout rate. I just also want to mention that when we're looking at our cost model, there are a couple of other considerations, and I have a little asterisk here that goes back to the little box on the left side around cost model. We also consider managed versus staffing engagements and dedicated versus leverage, and I'll just quickly tell you why that's important. A model consideration with regard to a position or positions that are managed in NTT Data refers to an NTT Data project in which we are managing that project. We have overall delivery oversight, we have SLAs versus staffing engagements that are more staff aug positions. We also look at our demand in terms of dedicated versus leveraged. A dedicated model would mean that we have full-time hires or employees that are 100% dedicated, and then a leveraged model would be less allocated, but perhaps more resources doing some work. So those are considerations that we think about in terms of viewing that overall demand. I'll just, one quick comment here that I'll just mention is that the idea with your demand is to monitor both your historical and your future demand to increase your forecast. That's the goal with your demand. And then looking at your supply, again, we talked about looking at that internal availability of your bench, your forecasted bench, who might be allocated but releasable, underutilized, freshers and trained resources, looking at your attrition, and that will bring you to a projected gap, or at least an initial gap. The second step with your supply is to look at what you might have in the external pipeline. We do recruiting in NTT Data, full-time recruiting. We use contingent labor. And in looking at our external supply, we want to have visibility into anyone who candidates in the external market who perhaps have accepted offers and they're waiting to join. And then lastly, we have something called proactive hires, in which we are looking at the market to bring in candidates. They are coming in not necessarily for a specific position, they're just coming into our practice. And then I'll just make one last comment around the supply. Training considerations, because there could be some cost impact, very, very important to keep this in consideration. There's an investment with training. There is an investment that would also be required once you train your resources to make sure that you're retaining them. You certainly wouldn't want to train up resources only to have them leave the company. and then finding areas in which we can absorb the cost of those proactive hires. And again, in closing that gap, determining what would these proactive hires look like? What is the skill? What is the practice? Can we bring in proactive hires that are able to allocate to multiple accounts? Or perhaps we work with our domain and vertical areas to look for some specific skill sets to align to specific accounts. And what that allows us to do is have our business take on some of that cost and risk. Okay, I'll leave you with some final thoughts here. This is an art and a science. We utilize a tool for our demand management and analytics. It makes it a little bit easier. This is a partnership. It's with resource management, the sourcing organizations, your sales team, your practices, your segment leaders, and then we also engage with our analytics team. This is an ongoing process. It's important to review that sales and demand forecast. Very important to try to keep your data clean. You'll want to monitor proactive demand against your projected demand to ensure that there's alignment. We want to make sure that what that that capacity planning is based on what's real and what we consider will be needed in the future. And then proactive hires need to be monitored. We certainly don't want our bench increasing. That could create some cost impact. And then lastly, one thing that is working for us that I think has been great for us to adopt is employee self-nomination to job postings. What better way to get your supply or increase your supply as to have employees actually go and self-nominate for positions, and then we can track that and capture that in our demand reports and supply reports. And then something else that we're adopting is a self-assessment for employees to determine skills and experience gaps. That way we have an opportunity to proactively close some of those gaps.
Okay. Marilena, thank you for that. We're going to take some questions here from folks on the broadcast here. I'm going to just cover off a few things, and I've got a couple of really important announcements that you're hopefully all interested in. I'll start with the RMCP program. If you're not familiar with the program, it's the first of its kind program that for resource managers to learn best practice, gain access to our resource library, and collaborate with your industry peers. And we've got over 400 companies now that have put people through this program that not only teaches you how to be a better resource manager, but we also provide an industrial grade resource management process as a part of that. You get with the documentation when you go through the program. So the program itself is provided in 3 different formats. You can come in class to a 3-day view. There's a 6-week, 2 hours a week online version, and we now have an on-demand version of the program as well. And part of this is a certification exam. There's a recertification process, and the course is we get great feedback on it, interactive lectures, case study, workshops, and things. So we actually have you work with your peers on various workshops and practice and exercises to work with what you're learning. Of course, currently priced at $18.95. It is going up for the in-class version to $19.95 beginning January 1. If you register between now and end of the year, you get this year's pricing. We do have these early bird prices for various things. If you're a project manager with a PMP certification through PMI, you can also get PDUs for attending and participating in the certification program that the RMI offers for this, and there's various levels of PDUs that are granted. The course price, by the way, includes travel, materials, and testing fees, and everything. It's an all-in price. So these are the upcoming schedule, which you can get on the website. The next in-class version's in Cincinnati, January 28th, and if you register between now and the end of the year, December 28th, it's $17.95, and those are the prices for after that. The online session early bird pricing, which is for the course starting February 5th, is $17.95, and then there's an on-demand version, which essentially you can get access to 24 by 7. So your choice as to how you'd like to consume that education. If you haven't been to one of our symposiums, I'd ask you to at least think about it, consider it. You can look at some information on last year's symposium. It's out on the RMI website already, and we're running our 3rd annual RM Symposium September 24th and 25th in Dallas, Texas. Again, again, you can go see some of what we did last year, but it's basically a day-and-a-half event that is jam-packed with everything resource management related. We have sponsors that come and we have sponsor booths, and you'll be able to see technology in action that's resource management specific, and integrate and network with your peers on, again, all things resource management related. So before I get to the Q&A, I want to again offer a very special thanks to MavenLink, Keyed-In, and Kimball Applications for their support of this broadcast. We really appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to move us into the Q&A section here. If you haven't noticed, there's a question and answer box on your go to webinar panels, and we'll be watching that panel for questions. And I'm going to start taking some of these right now. And Maria Elena, I've got a question for you, and it's specific to the interlock process, which you alluded to. Is, kind of stepping back, you've got an interlock process at NTT Data. Any tips and advice you'd offer to people about how to get a good interlock process in place in their organizations?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, Randy. So my recommendation is, and this is what we do at NTT Data, we have scheduled meetings between our practice partners and practice leads to review some of the reports that we're able to collect based on, again, pulling that view of that demand and the supply. We do a little bit of tweaking to kind of give us somewhat of a forecast of what skills will be needed when. There are meetings, and then we're able to determine where those gaps lie, and then kind of talk through, okay, how do we try to solve some of those gaps? But those meetings are scheduled regularly, and then there are additional meetings that would occur where perhaps maybe some investments would have to occur, along with connecting in with other GRM team members to just take a view of that sales and pipeline forecast.
Perfect. So great, thank you. Another question regarding your conversation on proactive hires. What is your funding model for ensuring there are funds to pay for these resources?
So there are two different ways that proactive hires are funded. Within NTT Data, the cost typically sits within our practices. That's where our resources are hired into. We work with our practice finance teams if we would have to move forward with those types of hires. Again, I had also alluded to perhaps maybe some proactive hiring, not necessarily just to allocate within practices, but also perhaps for specific accounts, and they align to our verticals. So having that conversation with the business leaders to see if there is the ability to take on some of that cost and that risk. And we partner in with our finance teams to determine, what we can handle in terms of putting in proactive hires. Where do we want to allocate that cost? Okay, perfect.
I'm going to handle next question is where in a typical org does resource capacity management typically or ideally sit? So the way the RMI typically will respond to that is that put it in a place where it can't be unduly influenced by people that want to tweak the numbers to fit a particular narrative or need that they might have. Is you want to put it, I call put it in Switzerland in a neutral place. Where most organizations, particularly larger ones, the concept of the resource management office is growing rapidly, and typically we would see that work gets done inside the RMO. That's basically got access to all the data, insights to where the demand's coming, and that's typically where it does. It doesn't have to be there, just to be clear. I mean, there are places you can put it, but it just needs to be in a place where it can operate in a way that it is free from influences that might tweak the outcome. Okay, so let's see here. Just looking for somebody asked here, what's a good starting point for an organization that's just getting to head down the path on resource, building resource management capabilities? we generally will tell people, go build your process first. Kind of get a sense for, what's the results you're looking for from your efforts, and then back into that. And build your process first. And by the way, as opposed to, it's a path well worn, you can go to the RMCP training class for less than a couple of grand. Like, walk away with an industrial strength process that you can then tweak to your particular needs, and avoid all the hassle of trying to create a process from scratch. We've already pretty much done that for you, and then you can take that and tweak it to whatever you want it to be. Thomas, I believe we're right at the top of the hour here, and I know we've got other questions, but we're about out of time here, so I'm going to let you go ahead and wrap. Well, actually, I'll wrap us up here. Maria Elena, first, I want to thank you for sharing your time and insights with the group. It was very, very helpful. And apologize for those folks. We got a ton of questions we didn't have time to take, but if you'll, by the way, if you want to send a note to info@resourcemanagementinstitute.com, we'll try to answer any other remaining questions that you might have, and we can go from there. So with that, I'm going to ask Thomas to end the broadcast. Again, thanks to our sponsors. Really appreciate their help and support. Maria Elena, thank you for being with us today, and thank all those who attended our broadcast today.
Yeah, thank you to Randy for your time today, and thanks everyone for joining us. This was our last Power Up of the year, but we have 4 more that we're going to have next year. And I'll do a quick plug for our next Power Up. It will be in February on sourcing strategies. So be on the lookout on our website and also your inbox for more information and to register for that. So with that, thank you everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.